Welcome back, everybody. This is Tyler Tolbert, and you are listening to The Pursuit of Ownership. This week, I want to do a little bit something different. Today, we have on a friend of the show and a friend of mine. He's a big proponent of shared practices and tons of other podcasts. He's a huge junkie for it. And he is in media res in The Pursuit of Ownership. He does not yet own a practice, but he will soon. He's absolutely going to be killing it. But I thought it'd be a huge service to everybody to hear from a soon-to-be dentist that is in media res and possibly in a similar situation that some of you are. So enjoy. Okay, and here we are with the Pursuit of Ownership. One thing we're hoping to do with this show is we're going to have a whole lot of experts in the field. They're going to be telling us all kinds of things and different facets of the market, and trying to help you guys get into ownership as soon as possible, and pertaining to your goals. But another thing we want to do is have some, very precocious people on here that are kind of in the midst of everything and just kind of get an idea of where they're at in their journey and how they're tackling it. And, I suspect that we'll be talking to people that many of our listeners can relate to. So today I have Kevin Reardon. He is a D4. Where at?
At Creighton University.
At Creighton University. Excellent. So I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself. Go ahead, Kevin.
What's up, Tyler? Thanks for having me on here. So like you said, my name is Kevin Reardon. I'm a fourth-year dental student at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, originally from the western suburbs of Chicago, and that's where I'm currently looking to pursue ownership. In my just kind of overview of where I've been with my journey. D2 year, I started the process of a mailer and figuring out what that would look like. And I ended up sending out, since then, I've sent out 2 rounds of mailers to this pretty specific area in the western suburbs of Chicago, looking for the right transition to ownership. I do have a father who is a dentist in that area. And I also have a brother who's 1 year behind me in school, and potentially... or I have a sister, not potentially I have a sister. I have a sister who's a junior in undergrad at Creighton as well, and potentially going into dentistry. So
excellent.
That's kind of what my situation's like.
Yeah, keeping the family. That is quite a dental family you got there.
Yeah, a couple cousins in dentistry too.
Really? Okay. So do you have any ambitions of you all working together and, kind of in the same area, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I feel like my vision's a little bit different than the one that I've heard a lot on shared practices, which is that get that just super high flowing, super efficient, low overhead office, just like cash flowing and getting going. My vision's a little bit more, not any better or anything, just different. I would really like to have a single location, multi-doctor, multi-specialty practice, pretty much not have to refer anything out. And I also would like to do that on a higher end fee-for-service model, if possible.
Okay. Very nice. I like it. So this is going to be kind of a group practice for you. And are you kind of hoping to be sort of a super GP of sorts, or do you want to be bringing specialists in to offer those services? What's your idea?
At this point, I'm kind of open to either thing. I guess it really just depends where it takes me. There are some procedures, obviously, that I really like more than others.
Sure.
But I'm not sure if I want to niche myself out just yet.
Yeah.
I think it's important, though, just to kind of talk about, that I'm coming from a different spot. There's not this cookie cutter way to approach ownership.
Absolutely.
And that's been my biggest challenge, is figuring out where it's going to take me and how to get to a little bit of a different place than you hear about from, what's kind of been done a lot and very well by the likes of George and Richard and all that.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, very well. So how did you kind of arrive at the vision you currently have? How does that sort of fit your goals and whatnot?
Mostly out of frustration. I think the things that I think like all good inventions or whatever, the things that are most frustrating is dealing with insurances and that problems with referrals and them not coming back, or just there's a lot of problems that I feel like this model kind of solves. And not having to deal with insurances, being able to provide same-day treatment, same-day specialty treatment, being able to not have to refer a patient to 7 different offices. If you need an implant, go here, and then an endo over there. and just kind of looking towards the future, thinking about, okay, what is the consumer, what does the dental patient these days want, and how can I get that? I also really, without naming DSO names, all dental students, we know these DSOs, they come and give lunch and learns and whatnot. And I hated the opportunities that they had for associates. And so in my mind, I kind of was just thinking, well, what would an ideal atmosphere and environment be like to kind of attract me versus what I was seeing, which was a lot of the DSOs had to offer. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah, that's beautiful. So is that something that you've had in mind? You said you started D2, which is fantastic. I love that. Is that something you had in mind back then, or has the vision changed over time? I mean,
I think when I originally started, I wanted to do multiple practices, multiple locations, just because that sounded super cool to me. It just sounds sexy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And before I really got a good understanding of how difficult that may be and what kind of problems are there, it's just something I wanted to do. Was that multiple practices? But the more I thought about it, is like, how can I maximize my own, leadership abilities, and how can I maximize the ability to control things? And I thought that doing it under one roof would be a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. I think it's a really good idea. That's actually something that, we've kind of been moving towards with shared practices, is kind of, instead of having, your single cookie cutter idea of the ideal practice, we're kind of looking at this sort of bimodal deal where you have solo practices that are, primarily dependent on the skills of one doctor. And of course, you're operating under lower overhead in those situations, and you're trying to keep your costs down, and you're just making your money off of, your own services. And then there's also sort of the group practice idea, which is something that, George is trying to capitalize on, where you are offering so many things under the same roof, and overhead may be a little bit higher, but you're, trying to, bring that sort of convenience to your patient that way as well. And there's certainly pros and cons to both philosophies, but we're kind of thinking about, both kind of modalities in totally different ways. So it's nice that you kind of already, have an idea that, you're going for that group practice, and that's kind of what you're looking for. So how did you go about targeting dentists that would be looking to sell to you in the area that you're hoping to look for? Tell me a little bit about your.
So I originally started doing a real old school demographic search, like George had talked about doing on like one of his first episodes. And then I kind of just threw the book out, because it was sort of I was basically getting the results of an area that I knew. And so I basically was getting results that were saying, this is a good area, this is a bad area. I kind of already knew what the areas were, good demographics and bad demographics. And then still, so I knew where I wanted to live, where I wanted to work, or where my dad's practice is that I'm going to be working. I knew in some capacity. And so basically, it didn't really matter what the demographics showed, because I'm determined to make it
where you were going.
Exactly. I make it work. And I'm basically targeting an area that has not the most favorable demographics, but because of that, we're going to be relying on a merger and acquisition model to grow, because I'm not going to be able to just open up and do that.
Yeah.
What I eventually did was I got on the Illinois State Dental Association website. And then from there, that's where I got my list of all the doctors that I wanted to contact. And kind of, I guess I'll just kind of walk through that process.
Yeah, please.
Of how I chose to do that. And I've shared some posts. I don't know. You might have seen some of the posts that I had in the Shared Practice Facebook group. You also might have seen me commenting on dental clinical pearls. I don't know if we got a job
breaking all the rules.
I don't know if anyone's, but if my name sounds familiar. Hold on, I'm just pulling this up. So
yeah, go ahead. No problem.
All right, here. So my initial list, I was targeting, again, I had a pretty specific end goal in mind. Well, at this point, I didn't know what was going on with my dad's practice, because he was looking for an acquisition at the time. So I didn't know if he was going to have 1 day a week for me, 3 days a week for me, or none.
Right. Okay.
So I went into this thinking, I don't want to rely on my dad to help me at all. I want to do this as if I have no other option, and as if I'm going to have to secure my whole livelihood without that. And so I went on I hit it pretty hard, and I chose like I said, I was looking for high fee for service. That would be ideal. And so I targeted 13 in my first one. I targeted 13 practices. 13 towns, and it was 189 dentists across 13 towns.
Okay.
The total population of those was like around 315,000, with an average. Hold on, I have the average dentist to population ratio of like 1 to 1,000.
Okay.
Maybe a little under, some over, depending on the town. Not phenomenal,
no,
by any means, but there are a ton of practices. So that, like I said, 315,000 people in these towns. But for example, the specific suburb that I'm from, I chose that to target that area. But then there are suburbs immediately adjacent to there that my town still services, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so there's
sure.
315,000 people in these towns. The general area that I blanketed serves an area of a population of about like 700,000.
Okay.
That's kind of, I felt like, even though the demographics town by town don't look that great, I knew the story was a little bit better than that.
Yeah. I mean, you already kind of had an understanding of the dynamics of the area because you already know the area. You know where patients are coming from, how far they're commuting, and that's all super important as far as like the net that you're casting. So that's cool.
And then other things that just another stat I had on that was the average median income of these areas I targeted was 99,000.
Wow.
So
okay.
It's a little bit higher than the national average. Is that, again, looking for places that would be more likely to have fee-for-service practices.
Sure. Yeah, but you didn't necessarily know that the practices that you were sending these mailers off to, or rather the doctors, had fee-for-service in those practices. But
correct.
Assuming that
I just was hoping for a higher likelihood in these areas.
Yeah. So tell me about your mailer. What was your message? How did you market yourself initially as a D2 to somebody?
Yeah. So my message was pretty clear. I said that, I was starting early, so it was not necessarily I'm looking for a transition. It was, I want to meet you to ensure that a transition could go well in the future. And I really hammered the point that I was so ambitious and getting out and wanting to meet you. I valued these people's patience. I know that these people really value their practices and their patients in their practices, and they wouldn't want to hand it off to just anybody.
Absolutely.
I also even hit on that, there's an ever-growing corporate dental environment, and I didn't really want to be a part of that. And I valued the private practice model better because I knew that would, that's the person that I wanted to appeal to, is the person who agreed with that.
Sure.
So I did just a regular sized envelope. I sent out 189 of them, regular sized envelope, hand addressed them all, and hand wrote just like "Dear Doctor," and then I signed my name, and then also wrote a little bit like "Looking forward to hearing back from you" on all of them.
Okay, very nice. And I like that you made the point about trying to preserve the private practice ownership aspect of it, because anybody that's going to sell to you is probably foregoing offers from corporate to buy out their practice, right? So I mean, you got to be appealing to some sort of ethos there, more than likely,
right? And I also figured there's no filter on here on this State Dental Association website to say no Heartland practices or whatever. So I knew that I would be sending this to some DSOs, but I also didn't really care because
ruffling some feathers.
There's no way that they have said about it anyway. So I didn't care about that. I thought it was worth that.
Yeah. So what was your response rate on that 189?
My response rate on 189 was on the first one, I got 12 responses.
Okay.
Of those responses, I think I had 1, 2, 3, 4. I had like 6 or 7 potential opportunities, a couple hard no's, and then 3 or 4 potentially associate or maybe long term, maybe down the road I'm looking to sell.
Okay.
And then one that was like an opportunity to associate for about 3 or 4 years, and then buy out a super high end niched out like TMD practice.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. But
I was pretty happy with 12 responses.
that's
I was
great.
extremely happy.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm impressed that, you were saying that off as a D2 and people were, obviously taking you seriously and considering your offer. I mean, that response rate is great. I mean, just based on, other mailers I've heard from, people, more senior than you. So it's nice that people were able to see that, your ambition and passion
I think
were shining through that. That's awesome.
obviously my data here is skewed towards the people who responded to me. So obviously I didn't hear
Naturally.
from those other 107 people. But
Yeah.
the people who, whether or not they did or did not have an opportunity for me, they were extremely complimentary of going out there and already starting. And also the people that had said, hey, I'm not really ready for this. Then I contacted them again. And then some of them did have some more immediate opportunities available. So I just wanted to kind of generally get rid of any idea that someone might have had in their head that starting too early is a thing, especially if you phrase it in a way that says, hey, I just want to I'm not looking for a transition immediately. I just want to have coffee. I just want to get lunch and get to, you're much more likely to either find a good opportunity, filter out a bad opportunity.
Yeah.
And just you're listening, that I highly recommend starting earlier because this was kind of a lot to sort through.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how many of those, 6 or 7, I think you said, opportunities, how many of those converted into a coffee break or what have you?
So I met 7 people in person, every single one. And I tried to do at least a half-day visit, and I ended up doing a full-day visit on everyone except this one practice that was a super Medicaid-based doctor that hated dentistry, hated his practice. And so he wanted to meet for 30 minutes, and that was more than enough time. So I got to meet. It was kind of tough scheduling over because I'm in Omaha with school, and then anytime I had a break, if I had a fall break coming up and I had 4 days open, I'd schedule 3 meetings or pack my schedule as much as I could and just go see their practice. I think that was super valuable. I didn't realize, I would say that's probably been the most valuable takeaway of this whole experience is going and seeing these practices. You can get, especially if you know what questions to ask, you can get an extremely good idea of what the office is producing, what their overhead's like, what their patients are like, what their actual procedure mix is like. And then also you get to see these different ways of practicing dentistry, from the super high end, super niche, super care about the patient experience to the just as good as dentistry, but more high volume, less specialty work. And I didn't really, I was so biased through seeing what my dad's dentistry, which I love and I think is a great model, but I guess I didn't know how much else was out there until I went and saw 6, 7, 8, 9 different practices.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you knew the right questions to ask. So I'm very curious. What do you got?
I have a list of that too.
Great.
Let me see if I
like lists.
Pull it up. I'll probably just spitball, but I think it's been talked about here on the podcast before. Most of them are drawn from these questions. And I think there's even a thing on the Shared Practices website that I drew a lot of it from, but
great.
How many, and obviously some of these are not necessarily, you need to ask them. You can just, how many operatories? You don't need to ask that. You just kind of go look, but how many ops, how many staff members total, and what are their roles? How many dentist days a week and how many hygiene days a week? And that one you kind of got to dig into.
Sure.
How long are hygiene appointments scheduled for? Is there assisted hygiene? How far booked out is hygiene? What specialty procedures do you do versus refer out? Patient flow. How many insurances are you in network with? And can you give a breakdown of the fee-for-service, PPO, HMO collections? And then also about...
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a solid list.
Yeah. So from there, I pretty much let... those would all just... So I would not ask all those questions to the doc. I would ask them specifically to the department that I was asking them about. So... Brilliant. That's another thing that I didn't do the first time I visited. And then after I was reflecting on it, I was like, man, I really should have talked to the hygiene more to get a sense of what the practice is really like. And then in the future, when I did this, I was like, wow, this is the most valuable thing, is talking to the hygienist, talking to the assistants, what's good. And or what do you like? What do you love most about the practice? And if there's anything you could change about the practice, what would it be? Which is a question that I only asked
awesome.
after I showed that I didn't want to bash the practice. I didn't want them to.
Yeah, of course.
And,
yeah, I mean, that's what you're buying into. That's the goodwill of the practice. It's, still going to be there after you buy out. So that's who you should be talking to. 100%. That's awesome.
So much value from those conversations that I had.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And so what was sort of the ideal timeline that you were looking for, with the potentially selling doc?
So it kind of changed over the time. And I guess it's not that important to talk about the historical changes of when I changed from what to what, but I'll tell you where I'm at now, and that my dad did end up buying a practice. And I guess I'll give a little overview of his practice. Sure. He's a pretty private person. I don't feel comfortable getting into the intimate financials of his, but I'll just generally.
Absolutely.
Totally. He had a 3.5 day a week practice that he was doing. He's got 100% fee for service practice, but he's doing mostly bread and butter dentistry. He's doing extractions, second molar to second molar. And he's doing most endo, referring out maxillary molars, and then doing some minor ortho. So that was his practice. And then he bought another practice, a smaller practice that was like a 2.5 day a week practice. And that practice was all was pretty much the same procedure mix as him.
Okay.
And also 100% fee for service. So that leaves me with my dad, who's working 6 days a week right now. God bless his soul.
Jesus.
In anticipation of me getting out so he went through 3.5 days a week for 23 years. And now he's doing 6. So once I graduate, I'm going to be taking 2 days a week from him.
Okay.
And associating there for 2 weeks. And now that leaves me with kind of a unique situation that I would be pretty much open to a turnkey practice if it was a smaller practice and could be eventually merged into this one. I would be open to a shorter associate to own period if I wanted to work a couple of days a week for a year and then buy out that practice then, because by that time, then my brother will have graduated.
Okay.
Relieve the work that was needed at my dad's office. And then also, I mean, if there needed to be a longer term associateship, I'm fine kind of keeping things how they were. So I kind of had this, I'll do whatever the situation called for. And that's kind of when I got into the numbers and got into the transition strategies with each doc. It was super, super dependent on what their own retirement goals were and what their transition strategy worked.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely got to dig into, where they're coming from and what their story is just as much as you have to explain yours. I mean, those two have to be copacetic. So, yeah. So what is the situation? So you said you did 2 mailers, right?
Yeah. So then my second round, I did. So then I heard Charles Loretto speak. I don't know if anyone's ever heard him speak or not, but it was kind of funny because I had sent out this mailer, and then his whole speech is like, do these mailers, put them in big yellow manila envelopes, write all this stuff on them, have all this. And I was like, all right, hey, I already did this once. I didn't quite do it like you. Now what? And so I've been meeting with him. He's been a huge help for me.
Great.
But anyways, I ended up sending a second round in his style to the same people. And then I also added like a few other fringe towns that I just wanted to get a little bit of a broader reach just in case.
Sure.
I was missing some good practices. So I sent 215 dentists across 16 towns, population total of about 380K, pretty similar average median income and pretty similar dentist to population ratio. And I got 9 more responses. Okay.
So you got 9 total out of that 200. How many?
So 12 total out of the first one, and then 9 from the second one.
Okay. I understand. Yeah. And were those pretty good leads or?
Yeah, actually these leads were better.
Great. Okay.
These leads ended up being the ones that, in general, I would say as a general kind of rule, they ended up being better opportunities. And some of them are not anything right now, but I have contacts and networking made with people who are in the area and are going to be wanting to sell. And like I said, my model kind of relies on eventually merging and acquiring practices in the area. So that was super helpful. The only thing I really did differently, like I said, was I did that whole big page manila envelope. And then I also kind of poked fun at myself in the first one because I knew a lot of these people had probably already seen my thing. And so I basically just put a joke in there like, hey, me again. I don't know if you threw that away or if it's sitting on your desk right now or it never even got to you. I don't really care because I still just want to meet with you. I'm not offended that you didn't respond. I get that you didn't want to talk to a D2, but I'm a D3 now, so maybe you want to talk to me now. And
so it's getting pretty serious.
Exactly right. So they were every single person that responded to me after that was like, hey, I did get your first letter. So sorry I didn't respond. I had it on my desk. I was thinking about it, and I just never made the call. So thanks for sending the second one. And I didn't send a third round, but honestly, I kind of regret not sending a third round because like with any marketing, it's like marketing. You know, if you're going to get new patients and you want to hit them with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep it running. Yeah. So are any of those currently interesting to you right now, or?
Yeah, so it's kind of narrowed down. If I was kind of going through earlier before this call and just kind of looking at the different opportunities I have had offered to me. And if someone had a different, I think someone with a completely open, with not a extremely defined vision like I kind of have, I feel like there are legitimately like 7 or 8 very solid opportunities in here, different associate to own, associate for a long term and then own later, turnkey opportunities, or just like partnerships. But for me, there's about 3 practices that I got the full financials for. And then there's another 3 within a mile or 2 of my dad's current practice.
Oh, wow.
That I have contacts with and have just kind of met, let them know, and they're going to be retiring within the next 5 years or so. So that's kind of where my prospects are right now.
Okay.
I'm kind of between 2. I did post about one of the practices in the Facebook group, and it ended up being basically a shyster. I mean, he's like 15% of his practice is like selling vitamins, and there's no hygiene program. And his average treatment plan was basically he was crowning every tooth. He said there's no such thing as a watch. It just is a bad deal. But the numbers looked phenomenal. The numbers were super tantalizing.
Yeah,
like $700,000, or taking home like $650 or something like that.
Sure.
But anyway, the 2 of them. Sorry, what's up?
No, I was just going to say, how did you uncover that? For those that
I had to meet with him, and he was actually on the phone, and I was kind of just like, because the first thing he basically was like, "Hey, I can give you my financials pretty much immediately," which that's not usually how these have gone. And so I was like, "All right, do you want to meet?" And he goes, "Well, I'll send you the financials, and then you let me know." And so he expected me to be super impressed by his take home and just say, "I'll buy the practice" without seeing it.
Sure.
Because he really was hesitant to let me stay for a whole day. And when I went and visited to shadow for a day, after every patient, he was like, what do you not know? What do you need to see? I'm making.
Yeah. Just kind of obfuscating.
It was
going on. Yeah.
It was like, I'm making so much money. I'm making more money than any dentist. It could all be.
Yeah.
What do you? So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And it was kind of a crisis averted.
Yeah, I think there's a fantastic takeaway there is that, as important as the numbers are, as much as we harp about it, like you got to know the story behind them. You got to know how we arrived there, and you got to make sure that you're clicking with that seller. There's got to be some kind of connection there. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd asked anyone who would, I have, your group of friends that you talk to about this transition. I would talk to anyone who would listen to me about this. I don't know, this practice, it's pretty sweet setup. It sounds like, but I don't know. He has no hygiene program, but he's got his numbers. The numbers, they look so good.
Yeah.
And it's really hard not to, there's all different types of practices that seem so attractive in one way or another that you kind of get this attraction to for whatever reason. And a lot of times they're not the best practices for you. So that was luckily the only one that I had that was a major red flag that I just still was interested in and avoided.
Yeah.
The other 2 are a little more straightforward and very genuinely nice people. So
that's great. Yeah. So what do you see, moving forward? Like how is, what's your idea with, I know you got graduation coming up.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure you've got a plan for what you're doing the second you walk out the door and everything. So how does this transition look, assuming that maybe you choose one of these practices or whatever suits you? What's your ideal situation?
Um, I think my ideal situation is, I guess it's still, I don't 100% know right now because I'm getting the financials of the third guy back, says before the end of January. So
Okay.
see how that goes. And basically it's just going to come down to which of these practices is right for me. Neither of them are like on their own. If I didn't have 2 days a week already spoken for, neither of these would be like the slam dunk $850,000 flowing great. They're both kind of doing between $425,000 and $500,000 on 2 or 3 days. Both have significant room for improvement in the procedure mixes that I could immediately add surgery, immediately add some endo, and I plan on taking an implant. I've placed by the time I graduate, I'll probably have placed, knock on wood, like 10 or 12 implants, which isn't anything crazy. But
That's awesome.
I also plan on taking a big course to start out. So I'm looking at implants to these. So kind of big growth opportunities in smaller practices, which I feel like and maybe this is me just being an emotional and wanting these things to work. But the way that I viewed it is, I'm in this weird situation, and this is like as much as I could produce on 2 days, 3 days a week. And so this is kind of the maximum that I could produce in those days. So
yeah,
without a longer term transition.
Yeah. Sure. That makes
sense.
I
guess it really just depends on a couple of things about like real estate and
right.
and how that's going to go out. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure how it's going to shake out. I'll let you know when it does, and I get the financials and get to look over all that. But
yeah, no, I definitely want to be hearing from you again, like 6 to 8 months from now, and, see how things are working out.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. I'm obviously super anxious about it, but
well, I think you're very well prepared though. You've met that anxiety with some good preparations, so that's good. So I mean, it sounds like you're pretty confident about yourself. Clinically, I know a lot of students, they start talking about getting into ownership right out of school. They're a little bit worried about speed and procedure mix and stuff. It sounds like you're not so much concerned about that.
Yeah, no, I am for sure.
Okay, good. All right.
I mean, sure anyone should be. I'm not an idiot. I definitely have confidence. I don't lack confidence. I don't think, but I'm very confident in the clinical experience that I have gotten. Creighton really allows us to do. There's no specialty programs here, and so they really let us do. I get to do a lot of the, a lot of stuff that a lot of people at other schools don't get to do. So that has given a level of clinical confidence that I don't know if I could have got elsewhere. And I'm super grateful for. Yeah. But of course, I'm not like thinking I'm going to be, or I'm not expecting to be getting out there and just turning these things into $1 million practices because I've got gold in the hands or anything. But
yeah, well, I'm sure you're very confident. It certainly sounds like it. So if you put a whole lot of thought into, how you're going to finance a practice, let's say that, one of these ends up being a pretty immediate transition, how are you going to secure that financing without having sort of a track record as a practicing dentist?
Right. So financing is something that I'd kind of reached out to the big players in loans early on and talked to, US Bank and Wells Fargo. And my guy at Wells Fargo basically said, 400 to 450. If you're looking at these practices that are doing $400 to $500,000, that shouldn't be a problem getting full financing. And then if I was going to need to also buy the real estate, we could make that work as well too, because that's not necessarily the same loan liability from. So I haven't had too much struggle with that. I personally was a little nervous about buying if I'm thinking long term, I want to be merging these practices, then I'm a little bit hesitant and worried about taking all this loan to buy some real estate that I don't really have any long term use for. And that's, I think, the biggest thing for me is trying to find commercial real estate agents. And just, I know there's so many resources to find stuff about dentistry and dental transitions, but I feel like there's not a ton of, maybe you could help me out. Maybe you know some people, but a ton of the real estate knowledge. I feel like the real estate advice that I see is basically limited to someone saying, you always buy the real estate, it's way better. And then some people saying, no, never buy the real estate, it's a headache. And then
yeah, you definitely get some mixed messages.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the impetus for some people we could certainly be having on the show with this pursuit of ownership sequence. And maybe I'll get two people on totally opposing ends of the spectrum there, and have them duke it out, and we'll see who comes out on top. Yeah, that might be a good pursuit, actually.
Yeah, I would be so happy to hear some of that. Also, I mean, I don't think from the response that I've got from people I've told what I'm doing, there's nothing extraordinary about anything that I've done with this mailer. And I just don't understand why more people aren't doing them, because this was I feel like such a success for me. And I almost feel like it's at the point where if you're looking to buy a practice and you're complaining about, oh, I don't know any practices, I don't have a relative like you have in dentistry. Obviously I'm taking advantage of my dad's connection there, but
as you should,
if you're going to complain about not being able to find a practice, but you're not willing to do mailers, I feel like you don't really have a leg to stand on, because it's so, I mean, it cost me, I'm looking at like the expenses. My first round cost me like $140 total, because I printed off, definitely not school printers illegally. Printed off, I got free printing. So it was $140 for the first mailer and $385 for the second round. So it was $500 to talk to 21 dentists and get all these opportunities that are off the market. And that's another little kind of token that I took away from this is I 1000% believe that the best practices are not for sale on the open market, are not, they're not lasting out on these brokers aren't just like holding these beautiful practices for years on end. And so just a cursory look through the classified ads, I don't think is going to get a lot of people very far.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, there's a method out there, and there's not a whole lot of people utilizing it. I mean, I kind of doubt that the people that were getting, your mailers, plural, had a lot of other ones coming across their desk from, dental students and, much less D2s, and I think that's kind of an advantage you have, really.
Just some of the common themes that I heard from practice owners was that they've had other mailers, but it's been from these big corporate chains sending them mailers about how great it is to buy in with them. And so again, none of them said they were, I mean, maybe they're just shielding me, but none of them said they received any other, besides one guy, that TMD guy. Everyone else was like, oh yeah, no, we don't get any of these, no one's really sending these. And it's such an easy way to differentiate. And then another thing is every single one of them, I don't know if this is all dentists. I don't know. I don't remember the class they taught this for us, but maybe back in the day they taught this to dentists, but they have no idea when they want to retire. And so it just seemed like every dentist been thinking about retirement for the last 5 years, probably should retire in 1 year, maybe is going to be retiring in 3 years.
Right.
And just finding those guys who are just starting to think about retirement through a mailer, you kind of being the impetus.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the best.
They're out. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're providing a clearer pathway for them to, actually, make that retirement actionable. And, you're giving them a glimmer of hope for, their baby. I mean, that's their practice they're going to be letting go. And you're this, bright-eyed young dentist with, all these ambitions and stuff. And I mean, I'm sure that you brought it across that you were going to be taking care of that. So I think that you could definitely be a motivational factor in getting those people to kind of speed up that timeline. Whereas if you were just waiting for them to put their practice up on the market, it may not come for 6-7 years, or, some dentists just don't really retire at all. They just kind of
I've seen
wind down the days. Yeah.
And I don't think, I don't think I did any special charming or anything. When I visited these practices, when you have a whole day with someone and you get to see them work and compliment their work and see their patients and hear their patients say great things about them, every dentist that I saw, just loved that. If you were just to call every dentist in your town and say, could I shadow you? They just love the opportunity to be able to show off what they've built over, everyone's so proud of these babies that they've built. And it doesn't take I don't feel like I did anything super special to win them over other than just ask them these questions, be genuinely interested in their practice, be genuinely interested in their patients, and just throw a couple compliments here and there.
Yeah. Unless they're selling vitamins and snake oil.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. I think his staff, it seemed like his staff hated him too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great takeaway, man. It's like, if you're willing to take advantage of this method and just put yourself out there, no matter what stage you're at, there's going to be a response. There's going to be people that are enthused about it, and they're going to give you an audience. And, if you're not doing that, there's no one really to blame but yourself. If you're hoping to get into ownership, you absolutely should be, putting yourself out there. If you don't have a vision yet, you need to develop it. And if you have a vision, you need to go ahead and start sending out mailers. That's your next step.
Absolutely. To that point, I did have a clear vision, but I don't know. And I don't really remember when it developed from the time I sent the mailers to now. That's why I didn't give that historical vision of when my vision changed.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't really know when I decided I wanted to do this, but I'm sure part of it got kind of hammered it down, was seeing these different styles of practice. So if you didn't have as clear a vision as me, if anything, that's a more reason to go out and do this, if not to get a transition opportunity, to just see these other different ways of practicing and then saying, all right, wow, this guy is doing it just like I want to.
Yeah.
I really love what he's doing.
Yeah. So the process actually kind of helped you refine your vision, in fact. So you didn't even have to have 100 beforehand. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point, because, personally, I'm starting to work up my mailer, and, I'm a little late to the chase. I'm a D3 now, and I haven't sent out 2 mailers yet. So I'm a little behind you. And one thing that's been going through my head is I'm still trying to figure out exactly what my ideal practice looks like.
And you said are you planning on sending mailers, or you haven't sent any out, but do you have a planning process or no?
I'm drafting it up. It's getting written, and, the biggest obstacle for me has been nailing down exactly where I'm going to be. I have kind of a unique, it's probably not unique, but I have a particular situation where my fiance and I were kind of trying to work out where we're going to be settling down. And it was literally between 2 very disparate states. And so it was like, well, I'm not going to start sending mailers until I nail down a state, at least. So, but now that's happened. And so, I've been kind of thinking about exactly what I'm looking for, but, it kind of sounds like, I have a rough enough idea to where if I just start sending these things out and talking to dentists and going to their offices, and, I'll have it refined for me right there. I'll be able to see it in person. That's probably, a good reason for me to,
you should. You should. And you're not behind at all. In fact, you're ahead of the game, because there's just so few people doing this. It baffles me why more aren't. So as long as you just get it done, you're going to beat 98% of the people out there looking for associates. And that's just going to put you that much ahead of the game.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. I think that's a very good nugget for anyone listening to the episode. Do you have any other little pieces of advice that, you want to tell, your D2 self, if you will, or someone listening to the podcast?
Just kind of the things that my classmates, I've kind of, for good or for bad, just been out my outspokenness in general, become someone in my class who people go to and ask about business and stuff like that. I'm sure you've got the same thing going on as does everyone that's, hosting this podcast these days.
Sure.
And the questions that I mostly get are, number one is debt. Everyone's so scared of debt. And I don't think it can be spoken on enough and harped on that. If the only reason keeping you from buying a practice is the debt, or the only reason the deal isn't going through is because of financing, you're just not being creative enough, or you're not thinking outside the box. Like, or if the thing is you're scared of debt, you just need to be educated. Because I don't think you're not dumb. You just don't understand. You haven't heard it explained to you the right way. And that's probably my fault, because I maybe haven't done a good job of explaining it to you, is what I have to say. So I think the debt thing is really big. Another thing is vision. We talked about it a lot, and I'm a huge vision guy and a huge mindset guy.
Good.
Abundance mentality, and I just can't. I just feel like there are so many fears, and this is, I don't want to get on a tangent about DSOs, but
please do.
There are so many fears that are just kind of preyed on, like all these big corporate chains, and even the Facebook groups that you post in. And I think Shared Practices is an exception to this, where it's very supportive community. But I won't name other ones, but you post in there, hey, I wanted to do this or that. Like, nope, never going to work. Nope, never going to work. Just people bringing you down in general. And if you think that something can be done in dentistry, it probably can be. If you wanted to do work, practice in a certain way, if you want to send these mailers, if you're trying to find an opportunity right out of the gate, if you're trying to eventually become like a pseudo specialist, whatever you're trying to do, I just think the fears that are spread and propagated by these DSO chains and just bad, all the bad aspects of dentistry are just totally baseless. The fears are fake. And I think the more people start getting over that and realizing that there is so much more that can be done, there are so many different ways to approach practicing dentistry, and that the landscape of what practices look like in the future, between whether it goes into more group practices or whether DSOs continue to expand, whatever the reaction to that is going to be from the private end. I think there's so many people who talk about the golden age of dentistry being over. But there's always going to be opportunity for people creative, and more than creativity, I think, is just passion. If you have passion, if you think you have a little bit of passion for it, go at it 100%.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, that's absolute gold. I'm glad you went on that tangent. And to speak on what you were saying, you're kind of talking about being creative and having these ambitions of doing certain things, and just sort of believing that you can do it, and that there's these unlimited possibilities. You may think that you have a unique vision, or that you have this sort of, out of left field ambition of how you want to practice dentistry. But, we're living in an information age where you can go out and you most likely can find someone that's already done it. Right. I mean, you can absolutely be a trendsetter still, but now more than ever, you can go out and find people that have already modeled the success that you hope to have, pick their brains. I mean, you can message them directly, instantly, right? And you can get advice from them, learn from their journey, learn from their mistakes without having to make them yourself, and then go out and do it. I mean, I can't think of, a better time in the history of dentistry where you could do that. I mean, you have access to anyone practicing anywhere. And so that sort of scarcity mentality of, no, you can't do that, no, the debt, et cetera, a lot of things you mentioned, it's myopic, to put it lightly. So I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah. And I think you said it better, and about the opportunity that's available right now, because I'll get someone that comes up to me and says, I want to be the team dentist for this NHL team. Or I want to be, I don't know, I think I want to be in this position where I'm doing all the implants. I own about 3 practices. I'm doing all the implants.
Yep.
And then kind of just having associates working under me. And then I get the people to get out and say, oh, this is what I would want to do in an ideal world. And then it's as easy as, okay, well, what are the steps that could take you there? And then just immediately started doing the first steps. Mm-hmm. I think, again, I don't own any stock in any printing companies, but I can't stress the doing mailers enough, because I think that's just such a great way to start. If you're like, oh, I don't know what my vision is, I don't even know what I could begin to think my vision is. I'm just a D2 and I'm just learning what a class 2 is. I don't know what I want to do. Well, to help you develop that, start reading books, start listening to, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, listen to podcasts more, and get out and send mailers, because that's just such a great way to refine your vision. And I wholeheartedly believe, like I said before, that you can't start too early. There's no such thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I think that is a wonderful note to leave on. Kevin, it has been an absolute pleasure listening to you.
Yeah.
You have a lot of really great thoughts. And I would be very pleased to have you on again, after, some of this is developed. I know things are moving very quickly, and I want to see where this goes, man. I'm excited for you.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And yeah, happy to come on or help however you need with the podcast. I D2, I take boards on Friday, but after that, or mock written boards on Friday, and until clinical portion in April, I'm got a lot of free time. So any way I could help, let me know. And to any listeners out here who connected at all to what I said, I am extremely excitable person, and I just get amped up, as you probably
I
might have heard for some of this. So if you have any questions or want anything from me, just find me on Facebook or Instagram and hit me up. I don't know how you guys are going to distribute my information. Any sort of influencer,
wide and far, with great detail.
But I'm happy to help anyone, and most importantly, if you're just on the fence, you're not sure about yourself, or you just need some encouragement, I would be more than happy to be the motivating factor to get you to get going and pursuing your vision.
All right, man. That is absolutely beautiful. Thanks you so much. All right, buddy.
Take care.
Well, all right, guys. I hope you really enjoyed that. I was a little bit nervous about bringing him on at first because obviously he's a student and there's not a whole lot of actual practice experience that some people really want to hear, but it actually turned out to be so awesome. And I was actually really happy about it. I was already a huge fan of Kevin before, just in other things that I'd heard from him in conversations that we'd had. But after listening to that back, I'm actually a much bigger fan. First of all, did not realize he had such a sultry radio voice, one that I'm actually very jealous of. Second, his vision, his clarity is so cool to see so early on in his career. And this is actually somewhat a couple years into his entrepreneurship. He, as he stated, in his D2 was when he sent out that first mailer and started making things happen. To him, there was never a time when it was too early to get started. And I just found that so inspiring, and I hope it resonated with everybody here. And some of the things that he said towards the end just really show you what an abundance mentality can really do for you. So I hope that episode did a lot for you. And I hope to also have in the future a lot of other people that are just sort of in the midst of this pursuit of ownership, not necessarily having, told us about everything in retrospect, because I think sometimes some of the hard times get glossed over. And by talking to people that are in the middle of it, those things get highlighted and they become a little bit more relatable. So you guys, I hope you really enjoyed it, and let me know what you thought about it. As always, you can email sptheinterns@gmail.com or even message one of us on Facebook. We're real friendly and we don't bite. So see you guys next week. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye. And if anybody else has questions about this episode or other episodes, if you have any topics you want covered, maybe some guests you want to suggest, or if you just want to reach out to us, you can find us on Facebook, or feel free to email us at spinterns@gmail.com. Details will be in the show notes. Thanks so much.